Among history's most remarkable figures, two women stand whose strength and legacy still echo across centuries: Alexandra Feodorovna of Russia and Sophia of Prussia. Each carved her legacy across continents, navigating politics, tragedy, and power in a world ruled by men. Let us begin with the first, Alexandra Feodorovna. Alexandra Feodorovna was born as Princess Charlotte of Prussia on the 13th of July in the year 1798 at Charlottenburg Palace in Berlin, within the Kingdom of Prussia. How did this quiet Prussian princess become the Empress of the vast Russian Empire? What burdens did she carry through war, marriage, and exile, all while remaining a woman of dignity and silence? The answers lie in a life filled with beauty, sacrifice, and sorrow, shaped behind the walls of imperial palaces. Please watch my full video until the end, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Please make sure to share it with your friends. Thank you. Now, let us dive into the full story. Born into the powerful Hohenzollern dynasty, young Charlotte grew up during the turbulent times of the Napoleonic Wars. Her early childhood was marked by fleeing armies, a lost kingdom, and the sudden death of her beloved mother, Queen Louise, when Charlotte was just 12 years old. Thrust into a royal court still reeling from military defeat and political humiliation, she had to mature quickly. As the eldest daughter, she stepped into ceremonial roles far beyond her age, carrying the memory of her mother like a sacred flame. Even as the world shifted violently around her, Charlotte learned early how to endure in silence, a skill that would define her reign in a foreign empire. In the cold winter of 1814, Charlotte's life changed forever when two Russian Grand Dukes, Nicholas Pavlovich and his brother Michael, visited Berlin. It was a diplomatic trip, but behind palace doors, a deeper mission was underway. The Russian and Prussian dynasties hoped to forge a powerful alliance through marriage. Charlotte, then 15, was chosen as a suitable bride for the younger brother, Nicholas, a tall, striking man with an air of quiet nobility. At first, it was merely an arrangement, but when Nicholas returned the following year, something remarkable happened. They fell deeply in love. Despite their formal introductions, the two shared long walks across the Potsdam countryside and attended operas together. Charlotte wrote to her brother with rare confidence, "I like him and am sure of being happy with him." Their connection was more than ceremonial. It was sincere, spiritual, and emotionally resonant. Charlotte admired Nicholas's warmth and inner discipline, while he was drawn to her intelligence and calm strength. They were third cousins, both descendants of Frederick William I of Prussia, but their bond transcended bloodlines and diplomacy. By October of 1816, their engagement was publicly announced. In June of the following year, Charlotte left her homeland and arrived in St. Petersburg with her brother William. There, she took on a new identity, converting to Russian Orthodoxy and adopting the name Alexandra Feodorovna. On her 19th birthday, the 13th of July, 1817, she married Nicholas in the Grand Church of the Winter Palace. It was the beginning of a royal love story, one filled with faith, devotion, and the heavy weight of destiny. Charlotte's arrival in Russia marked the end of one life and the beginning of another. On the 9th of June in the year 1817, she stepped onto Russian soil for the first time, accompanied by her brother William. The grandeur of St. Petersburg and the formality of the imperial court could not hide the reality. She was now expected to abandon her faith, language, and identity in exchange for an empire. To marry Nicholas, she was required to convert from Calvinism to Russian Orthodoxy, a deeply emotional and spiritual transition. This act was not only political but deeply personal. At her baptism, she received a new name, Alexandra Feodorovna, Though she accepted it with grace, the shift brought confusion and sorrow. The language, rituals, and customs of the Russian court were foreign, and she often felt lost in translation, spiritually and emotionally. Still, her love for Nicholas remained a source of comfort. Their wedding took place on the 13th of July, 1817, her 19th birthday, in the Grand Church of the Winter Palace. The ceremony was dazzling, yet intimate in feeling. Alexandra would later recall how she placed her life with complete confidence and trust into Nicholas's hands, knowing he would never betray her heart. Though the pageantry was immense, Alexandra's transformation had only begun. Behind the imperial titles and glittering jewels stood a young woman grappling with displacement, expectation, and the quiet fear of not truly belonging. Yet through it all, she smiled beside her husband, ready to walk into the unknown as Empress in waiting. The glittering world of the Russian imperial court proved far more isolating than Alexandra had imagined. Though she held the prestigious title of Grand Duchess, her early years in St. Petersburg were clouded by loneliness and cultural dislocation. The cold elegance of the Winter Palace, the strict etiquette, and the ever-watchful eyes of courtiers left her emotionally adrift. She missed Berlin, her native tongue, and the simplicity of her Prussian upbringing. At first, Alexandra struggled with the Russian language, relying instead on German and French, the preferred tongues of the aristocracy. Though she studied under the poet Vasily Zhukovsky, she never fully mastered Russian, which widened the gap between her and the broader society. She was perceived as reserved and distant, and her foreignness never quite faded in the eyes of many Russians. Despite these challenges, she managed to earn the affection of her mother-in-law, Maria Feodorovna, though her relationship with Empress Elizabeth Alexeyevna remained strained. Her health, already delicate, suffered from the stress of her new life. Yet Alexandra carried herself with poise, gaining quiet respect for her elegance and dignified composure. What sustained her during these uncertain years was her bond with Nicholas. In private, they created a haven where titles and formalities faded. He called her Mufi, a tender nickname that softened the rigidity of court life. It was in these quiet moments, seated in their private apartments, that Alexandra found fleeting happiness. While she learned to smile in public, her heart clung to the safety of love, a love that would become her anchor amid storms to come. Motherhood came early for Alexandra Feodorovna, and with it came a wave of emotional and physical upheaval. On the 29th of April in the year 1818, she gave birth in Moscow to her first son, Alexander, the future Tsar Alexander II. It should have been a joyous event, but behind the scenes, Alexandra battled exhaustion, isolation, and an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. She was still adjusting to court life, still learning a new language, and now she was also responsible for raising the next ruler of an empire. The following year, she gave birth to her daughter Maria, but her physical health deteriorated. The strain of multiple pregnancies in quick succession, combined with the pressures of imperial expectations, began to take a toll. In 1820, she suffered the devastating loss of a stillborn daughter, a tragedy that left her in deep depression. For months, she withdrew from court life, gripped by sorrow and plagued by anxiety. Her doctors recommended rest and travel, and Nicholas, ever devoted, took her back to Berlin for the first time since their marriage. There, in the quiet comfort of her homeland, she found temporary relief. These visits, repeated again in the summer of 1824, were her rare chances to breathe outside the confines of Russian formality. But each return to St. Petersburg reminded her of the burden she now carried. No longer just a consort, she was the mother of a future Tsar, expected to remain composed, graceful, and serene. Yet beneath the silk and ceremony, Alexandra was still a young woman grieving her losses and learning how to carry the weight of a crown and cradle at once. Though Alexandra and Nicholas had once lived quietly on the margins of imperial politics, their future changed dramatically in the early 1820s. Tsar Alexander I, Nicholas's elder brother, had no legitimate heirs. His chosen successor, Grand Duke Constantine, had secretly renounced his claim to the throne in favor of Nicholas. But this arrangement was not public knowledge, and confusion over the succession began to build. Amid this growing uncertainty, Alexandra's life shifted once more. She now found herself on the edge of becoming Russia's next empress, a daunting role for someone still regarded as an outsider by many in court. The pressure mounted in silence, especially as rumors of political unrest and dissatisfaction with the monarchy grew stronger. Alexandra's health remained fragile, and her emotional resilience was tested daily by the strain of looming responsibility. Still, in private, she and Nicholas continued to find solace in one another. They took comfort in family life, raising their growing number of children with great care. By 1824, they had returned to St. Petersburg, summoned back by the ailing Tsar. Alexandra sensed that her quiet world was slipping away. In December of 1825, the crisis finally erupted. Following Tsar Alexander's sudden death, Nicholas reluctantly accepted the crown amid confusion and resistance, a period marked by the Decembrist uprising. Though Alexandra did not yet wear the title of empress, she was already preparing herself in heart and spirit. Soon, she would step onto the throne beside her husband, not by ambition, but by duty, devotion, and destiny. On the 1st of December in the year 1825, Nicholas ascended to the Russian throne, and Alexandra Feodorovna officially became Empress Consort. But her rise came during a moment of national chaos. Within days of her husband's accession, the streets of St. Petersburg filled with rebellion. On the 14th of December, a group of reform-minded army officers launched the Decembrist Revolt, a short but bloody uprising that aimed to prevent Nicholas's rule. From the safety of the Winter Palace, Alexandra could hear gunfire echoing through the city. She feared not only for her husband's safety, but for the lives of her children. The trauma left a lasting mark. It was during this time that she developed the first signs of her lifelong nervous condition, involuntary tics that would later become a shaking of her head, worsened by fear and emotional stress. Despite the grim beginning, Alexandra was crowned alongside Nicholas on the 3rd of September in the year 1826 at the Assumption Cathedral in the Kremlin. The ceremony was resplendent, filled with traditional Orthodox ritual, golden vestments, and the symbolic anointing of power. But behind the public grandeur lay a private tension. The empire was fragile, and Alexandra knew it. Though she remained largely removed from political decisions, Alexandra became Nicholas's emotional anchor. He confided in her, trusted her presence, and relied on her calm voice when turmoil surged. She did not seek to lead the empire, but her quiet presence lent strength to the man who did. As the new empress, she was no longer merely a foreign bride, she was now part of Russia's soul, entwined in its triumphs and tragedies. Behind the walls of palaces and the glow of ceremonial duties, Alexandra Feodorovna lived a life centered around motherhood and private devotion. Between the years 1818 and 1832, she gave birth to 7 children, each one welcomed with tenderness and responsibility. Her firstborn, Alexander, would one day become Tsar. The others, Maria, Olga, Alexandra, Constantine, Nicholas, and Michael, were all raised under her careful guidance and affection. Alexandra's approach to motherhood was both traditional and deeply personal. She believed in maintaining a sense of order and dignity, but also allowed her children warmth, music, and learning. She insisted on moral education and frequently shared stories from her own upbringing in Prussia. The imperial family spoke German and French at home, and their letters were filled with intimacy and sincerity. Though burdened by poor health, Alexandra rarely let her illness hinder her maternal role. She maintained a close connection with her children and Nicholas, who deeply admired her nurturing spirit. She created a household that, for all its wealth and duty, still felt like a sanctuary. Nicholas, in moments of exhaustion, often sought comfort in her company and that of their children. Her presence in the family was so strong that during the Winter Palace fire in 1837, Nicholas ordered his aides to save only one personal item, the box containing Alexandra's letters from their courtship. This act revealed just how central she was to his world. As a mother and consort, Alexandra embodied patience, quiet strength, and unwavering love, virtues that shaped not only her children's lives, but the atmosphere of the Russian court itself. As Empress of Russia, Alexandra Feodorovna maintained a delicate balance between her ceremonial role and her declining physical health. Publicly, she appeared regal and composed, tall, graceful, with a refined sense of style and a fondness for soft-colored gowns and delicate jewels. She attended balls, performed court duties, and fulfilled her role with dignity. Yet beneath this polished image was a woman struggling quietly with pain. Recurring health issues plagued her throughout her adult life. She suffered from frequent heart palpitations, a hoarse voice, and nervous conditions that caused visible tremors. By the time she reached her 40s, she appeared far older than her years. Her once slight tics evolved into a persistent shaking of the head, a trait she would carry until her final days. Despite this, Alexandra refused to withdraw from her responsibilities. She was not interested in politics or charitable leadership, like some other empresses of Europe, but her devotion to her family and her husband's emotional well-being made her central to the life of the court. Nicholas leaned on her for strength, and in private moments, she remained his confidante, the calm amid his heavy burdens as autocrat. She found comfort in music, reading, and the elegance of court dances, where she excelled in the mazurka. Though not outgoing or politically ambitious, she possessed a clear intellect and a subtle sense of humor. Alexandra's role was not forged in public reforms or declarations, but in the quieter realm of loyalty, sacrifice, and personal endurance, qualities that held the imperial family together even as storms approached from beyond the palace gates. For over 25 years, Alexandra Feodorovna and Nicholas shared a deeply affectionate and emotionally bonded marriage. But by the early 1840s, cracks began to appear, not from a loss of love, but from Alexandra's deteriorating health. Suffering from recurring heart issues and increasing frailty, she was advised by doctors to avoid intimacy. It was during this vulnerable period that Nicholas turned to another woman, Varvara Nelidova, one of Alexandra's own ladies-in-waiting. Varvara was discreet, elegant, and loyal, and she became the emperor's companion in a way Alexandra could no longer be. The relationship, while painful for Alexandra, was never scandalous by court standards. Nicholas remained emotionally devoted to his wife, continued to spend time with her, and maintained their close family bond. Yet the presence of another woman created a quiet tension within the imperial household. At first, Alexandra was deeply hurt. Jealousy and insecurity weighed on her already fragile heart. But in time, she accepted the reality of their situation, even forging a respectful relationship with Varvara. The three formed a complex triangle of affection, trust, and silent compromise. When Alexandra's health required long travels to warmer climates, Varvara often accompanied them, a presence both necessary and symbolic. Nicholas once wrote with raw honesty, "Happiness, joy, and repose, that is what I seek and find in my old Mufi." Despite the circumstances, Alexandra never lost her emotional place in his life. Theirs was a love tested by illness, distance, and human need, but never erased. In the imperial world where appearances reigned supreme, their private truth was something softer, a partnership held together by memory, devotion, and a quiet, unbreakable bond. By the mid-1840s, the once luminous Empress of Russia had begun to fade from public view. Alexandra Feodorovna, still elegant and composed, now lived in the shadow of persistent illness. Her nervous condition had worsened, with constant trembling that made appearances at court increasingly difficult. Her slender frame grew weaker, and her face, once admired for its regal charm, now reflected the toll of decades under imperial pressure. Though she continued to participate in select state functions, Alexandra retreated more often to private residences, especially the Peterhof Palace, which became her sanctuary. Nicholas, ever protective, commissioned the construction of the Palace of Orinda in Crimea, a warm, tranquil retreat intended for her comfort. Yet Alexandra was only able to visit it once before war interrupted everything. Her days were spent reading, writing letters, and surrounding herself with music and a close circle of trusted attendants. She remained affectionate with her children and kept a careful eye on their development, even as she grew more detached from the ceremonial world of the court. Still, Alexandra never allowed bitterness to take root. She bore her pain with quiet dignity and a sense of spiritual acceptance. Her marriage, though tested, remained emotionally grounded. Nicholas continued to visit her frequently, bringing with him not just reports from the capital, but the tenderness of a husband who had never stopped caring. As her world narrowed, Alexandra's strength became more internal. In her final years as empress, she embodied not just royalty, but a rare grace, the kind that lives not in splendor, but in endurance, faith, and silent resilience. The early 1850s brought a storm that neither Alexandra Feodorovna nor her beloved Nicholas could withstand. The Crimean War, which erupted in 1853, placed immense strain on the Russian Empire and deeply troubled the imperial couple. Nicholas, once so commanding, grew weary with grief over the losses Russia suffered. Alexandra, already fragile in body, now became fragile in spirit as well, watching her empire unravel and her husband decline. In the winter of 1855, Tsar Nicholas contracted influenza. What began as a common illness rapidly turned grave. Alexandra remained at his side, praying, weeping, and offering quiet comfort in his final hours. Their bond, built over decades of shared joys, sorrows, and sacrifice, now stood in the shadow of death. On the 6th of February in the year 1855, Nicholas died, leaving Alexandra a widow after 37 years of marriage. The loss shattered her. Though their marriage had faced trials, Alexandra had never known life without Nicholas since the age of 17. She withdrew immediately to the Alexander Palace in Tsarskoye Selo, wearing mourning black and surrounding herself with the symbols of their life together, portraits, letters, memories. Even in widowhood, her heart remained tied to her husband's presence. In a quiet gesture of forgiveness and respect, she appointed Varvara Nelidova, Nicholas's former companion, as her personal reader. It was an extraordinary act of grace from a woman who had suffered so deeply, yet clung to the threads of dignity, love, and understanding. The Empress had lost her anchor, but not her strength. As Dowager Empress, Alexandra Feodorovna entered a final chapter shaped by solitude, reflection, and quiet dignity. No longer bound by court obligations, She chose to live in seclusion at the Alexander Palace in Tsarskoye Selo, surrounded by memories of her life with Nicholas. Her health continued to falter, and she rarely appeared in public, yet her influence lingered in the hearts of those closest to her. Despite her physical weakness, Alexandra maintained strong ties with her children, especially her son, the new Emperor Alexander II. She offered maternal advice and emotional steadiness, even as she remained outside the political sphere. Her days were spent reading, praying, and writing letters, often to friends and relatives abroad. Her relationship with Varvara Nelidova, her late husband's companion, evolved into one of surprising closeness. Rather than clinging to resentment, Alexandra showed quiet magnanimity, appointing Varvara as her personal reader and companion. It was a final gesture of emotional maturity, a reflection of the grace that had always defined her private self. Unable to bear the harsh Russian winters, she traveled to Switzerland, Nice, and Rome in hopes of relief. Yet even there, her heart remained with Russia. In a letter written in 1859, she confessed, "I am homesick for my country and reproach myself for costing so much money when Russia needs every ruble." As her body grew weaker, her soul turned inward. In her widowhood, Alexandra found peace not in grandeur, but in memory, and in the quiet endurance that had carried her through a lifetime of love, loss, and duty. By the summer of 1860, Alexandra Feodorovna had become a shadow of her former self, frail, tired, and quietly preparing for the end. After returning from a final journey abroad in July, her health declined steadily. Though doctors urged her to seek warmer climates once more, she refused. Her only wish was to die on Russian soil, in the place where her life as empress had unfolded. She chose to remain at the Alexander Palace in Tsarskoye Selo. Those final months were marked by increasing weakness and long hours spent alone or with close attendants. Despite her suffering, she remained serene, never complaining. Her children visited when possible, and Varvara Nelidova remained faithfully by her side. In her final days, Alexandra spoke little, conserving her energy, reflecting on the years that had passed, from a Prussian princess to the mother of an emperor. On the night before her death, those nearby heard her whisper softly, "Nicky, I am coming to you." It was a tender farewell to the man who had shaped her world. On the 1st of November in the year 1860, Alexandra passed away peacefully in her sleep, at the age of 62. She was buried beside Nicholas at the Saints Peter and Paul Cathedral in St. Petersburg. Her journey had come full circle, from the palaces of Berlin to the heart of the Russian Empire. And though her voice had often gone unheard, her presence left a quiet but lasting imprint on the Romanov legacy. Alexandra Feodorovna did not rule, command armies, or champion sweeping reforms. Yet her legacy endures, not in statues or proclamations, but in the quiet strength with which she carried a lifetime of duty, sacrifice, and heartbreak. From her early days as a reserved Prussian princess to her final hours as Dowager Empress of Russia, Alexandra lived within the margins of power, offering support rather than seeking spotlight. She raised future emperors, shaped the values of a royal household, and remained a constant emotional compass for Tsar Nicholas throughout his long and often troubled reign. Her dignity in suffering, loyalty in adversity, and grace under pressure became defining traits not only of her character, but of her era. Alexandra never embraced the political stage, yet her presence influenced it, subtly and silently. Her marriage to Nicholas strengthened ties between Russia and Prussia. Her maternal devotion helped mold the next generation of Romanovs, and her quiet endurance became a symbol of inner resilience within the imperial court. Even after death, she was remembered not for bold declarations, but for her gentleness, her faith, and her unwavering devotion to family. In portraits, she appears serene, composed, often distant. But behind that image lay a woman of deep feeling, silent courage, and rare emotional depth. Alexandra Feodorovna's story is a reminder that power does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers, through letters, lullabies, trembling hands, and a final farewell whispered to the one she loved. Hers was a legacy written not in noise, but in grace. Let us now turn to another remarkable figure of royal descent. Sophia of Prussia was born on the 14th of June in the year 1870 at the News Palais in Potsdam, within the Kingdom of Prussia. How did a German-born princess, raised among the Prussian elite, become queen of a nation caught in endless political storms? What inner strength allowed her to balance dynastic loyalty, religious transition, and personal loss across two different worlds? And how did history nearly forget the woman who once stood at the crossroads of empires and revolutions? Sophia's story begins within one of Europe's most powerful families. She was the daughter of Frederick III, the German emperor for just 99 days, and Victoria, Princess Royal of the United Kingdom, eldest daughter of Queen Victoria. Her upbringing was thus shaped by both the strict discipline of the Prussian court and the liberal intellectual traditions of her English mother. Educated to be fluent in several languages and trained in art, science, and music, Sophia's childhood was one of privilege, yet shadowed by sorrow. Her father's early death from cancer devastated the family and marked Sophia deeply. From her mother, she inherited a sense of moral purpose and intellectual curiosity. From her German roots came a firm sense of order and national pride. Even in childhood, Sophia displayed a quiet dignity that set her apart. Observers noted her thoughtful nature and deep inner life. But few could have imagined that this reserved princess would one day become a central figure in the turbulence of Greek politics, faith, and war. As Sophia of Prussia entered her late teens, she became a figure of interest in the dynastic marriage networks of Europe. Tall, graceful, and reserved, she possessed the royal pedigree that made her a desirable match for courts across the continent. It was during a visit to her English relatives that she first met Crown Prince Constantine of Greece, the eldest son of King George I of Greece and Queen Olga. The encounter was arranged as a diplomatic opportunity, but something unexpected unfolded. Despite their differing cultural and political backgrounds, Sophia and Constantine found a sincere affection for each other. Constantine, often called Tino by family, was intelligent, handsome, and military-minded, and Sophia was drawn to his charm and ambition. He admired her composure and quiet strength, yet the match was not without complications. Greece was an Orthodox Christian country, and Sophia's Lutheran background presented a challenge. Moreover, her mother, deeply rooted in English traditions, was concerned about her daughter's future in a politically unstable nation like Greece. There were also tensions between the British and German branches of Sophia's family, especially given her uncle's growing power as Emperor Wilhelm II. Still, Sophia was determined. She had found not only a suitable husband, but someone she genuinely loved. Negotiations between the courts were carefully handled, and by 1888, the engagement was formally announced. The match was both personal and political, a bridge between German order and Greek idealism. For Sophia, it marked the beginning of a journey that would take her far from the halls of Potsdam and into a realm of shifting alliances, religious transformation, and royal responsibility. One of the most defining and controversial decisions Sophia of Prussia ever made was her conversion from Lutheranism to Greek Orthodoxy. At a time when religion was not only a matter of personal faith, but of political identity, this shift caused ripples across Europe. The German and British courts reacted with alarm, and Queen Victoria herself expressed disapproval, fearing that Sophia was abandoning her Protestant roots under pressure. But for Sophia, the choice was not made lightly, nor was it imposed upon her. She studied Orthodox theology carefully, asked searching questions, and approached the transition with sincerity and conviction. Her decision came not just from duty to her future role as Crown Princess of Greece, but from a growing spiritual connection to the Orthodox tradition, and its emphasis on ritual, mystery, and continuity. Her conversion was formalized shortly before her marriage, in a ceremony that symbolically affirmed her allegiance to her new homeland. While it caused a stir among her Protestant relatives, in Greece it was seen as a gesture of unity and loyalty. For the Greek people, Sophia's willingness to embrace their faith earned her cautious respect, though some still viewed her as a foreigner in spirit. This early act of personal courage revealed something essential about Sophia. She was not afraid to chart her own course, even at the cost of family disapproval or political discomfort. Her faith, once a source of controversy, would become a cornerstone of her identity, a quiet strength she would return to in times of exile, grief, and war. On the 27th of October in the year 1889, Sophia of Prussia married Crown Prince Constantine of Greece in Athens. The wedding was a grand event, blending the formality of Prussian ceremony with the color and warmth of Greek tradition. Foreign dignitaries filled the halls, and the streets of Athens overflowed with curious onlookers hoping to glimpse their new crown princess. Yet behind the pageantry lay a deeper challenge: Sophia's transition into an unfamiliar world. Greece, unlike the structured courts of Berlin or London, was politically fragile, economically strained, and culturally distinct. The monarchy itself was still finding its place in a nation with a deep republican undercurrent. Sophia, now a symbol of foreign alliance, had to learn how to navigate public expectation, palace politics, and a language she did not yet speak. She arrived in Athens with grace and humility, determined to adapt. She began studying Greek, adopted local customs, and showed genuine interest in Greek history and Orthodox liturgy. Her early efforts to connect with the people, visiting hospitals, supporting charitable works, and attending national celebrations slowly earned her admiration. Still, not everyone welcomed her. Some Greeks viewed her as a symbol of German interference, while others resented her royal privilege. But Sophia remained composed, choosing dignity over confrontation. With Constantine often away for military training or state business, she leaned on her growing faith and deep sense of duty to carry her through. Her marriage had placed her on a new stage, and her royal title brought responsibilities she could never have imagined as a girl in Potsdam. But Sophia, even as a stranger in a foreign land, began laying the quiet foundation for her role as future queen. As Crown Princess of Greece, Sophia of Prussia settled into a life shaped by duty, adaptation, and the quiet pursuit of connection. In the years following her wedding, she dedicated herself to mastering the Greek language, immersing herself in Orthodox traditions, and understanding the customs of her adopted country. Her early efforts to become Greek were not superficial gestures, but acts of genuine respect, and they gradually helped ease public suspicion. Sophia embraced her role as a mother with equal devotion. Between 1890 and 1902, she gave birth to 6 children, including future King George II and Prince Paul, both of whom would later reign over Greece. Her household was lively, filled with activity and education, and she took an active role in her children's upbringing, insisting on a balance of discipline, scholarship, and cultural awareness. In public life, Sophia supported hospitals, orphanages, and schools. Her visits to the sick, and wounded during military campaigns, began to shape her public image as a caring, steady presence, someone more than a foreign consort. While political affairs were largely in the hands of her husband and the court, Sophia's influence was felt behind the scenes, particularly in charitable and religious circles. Despite lingering doubts among some segments of society, Sophia was slowly transforming perception through consistency, warmth, and resolve. Her grace in ceremonies, sincerity in service, and modesty in daily life made her increasingly admired. Though the palace remained her base, her heart had begun to settle among the olive groves and blue skies of Greece. Sophia was no longer just a Prussian princess. She was becoming the soul of a new royal chapter in Hellenic history. In March of 1913, following the assassination of King George I in Thessaloniki, Crown Prince Constantine ascended the throne as King Constantine I, and Sophia became Queen of Greece. The coronation, though solemn and dignified, was overshadowed by grief and uncertainty. Greece had just emerged victorious from the First Balkan War, yet political instability remained a constant undercurrent. As queen, Sophia took on expanded duties, but she continued to lead with the same quiet, composed energy that had defined her earlier years. She increased her charitable work, supported military hospitals, and advocated for improved health care for women and children. Her presence at public events was calm and reassuring, a maternal figure in a time of rising tension. Yet being queen came with new challenges. Sophia was married to a monarch whose military ambitions and German sympathies placed him at odds with pro-Allied factions in Greece, particularly during the early stages of World War I. Her own German heritage became a point of controversy. Critics accused her of undue influence, while newspapers portrayed her as an agent of foreign interests. Sophia, however, kept her distance from direct political involvement. She remained focused on humanitarian work and religious observance, believing that her role was to unify rather than divide. Still, the pressures were mounting. Even her well-meant actions were interpreted through a political lens. Despite the growing storm, Sophia continued to serve with dignity and resolve. Her reign had begun not in triumph, but in loss and complexity. And as the queen of a deeply divided land, she would need every ounce of courage her upbringing had taught her. The years that followed Sophia's coronation were consumed by conflict. The Second Balkan War erupted in 1913, barely months after King Constantine's ascension. Though Greece emerged victorious, the cost was high: thousands of lives lost, strained alliances, and rising internal divisions. Queen Sophia once again took on a caregiving role, overseeing aid for wounded soldiers and expanding hospital services. Her calm presence brought comfort, even as the foundations of Europe began to shake. When World War I broke out in 1914, Greece faced a defining test. King Constantine favored neutrality, influenced in part by his German training and ties to Kaiser Wilhelm II, Sophia's own brother. But Prime Minister Eleftherios Venizelos strongly supported the Allied powers. The resulting national schism tore Greece in two. Families, military leaders, and politicians split between royalist and Venizelist camps. Sophia found herself at the heart of this divide. Though she remained formally apolitical, her German roots made her a target for suspicion. She was accused of manipulating her husband's decisions and undermining Greek democracy. Riots broke out. The royal family's image suffered badly, and her previous goodwill faded under waves of propaganda and mistrust. In 1917, Allied forces pressured Constantine to abdicate, forcing the royal family into exile. Sophia, heartbroken but composed, left Greece with her children and husband, first settling in Switzerland. It was a painful departure from the country she had come to call home, a place where she had built hospitals, raised her children, and embraced a new faith. The war had robbed Sophia not just of a crown, but of her identity as queen and mother of a nation. In exile, she clung to her faith, her family, and a quiet hope that her service had not been in vain. The forced abdication of King Constantine I in 1917 marked one of the most painful chapters in Queen Sophia's life. Though the decision was framed as a diplomatic necessity under Allied pressure, it felt deeply personal. A judgment not only on Constantine's neutrality, but on Sophia's own loyalty and lineage. The royal couple was exiled from Greece under growing hostility, their reputations tarnished and their roles erased. Sophia's grief was twofold: the loss of her husband's throne and the sudden unraveling of the life she had built over decades. She had worked tirelessly to earn the respect of the Greek people, only to be branded a foreign manipulator. She watched as her son Alexander was placed on the throne, a move meant to preserve continuity but one that only deepened the family divide. Worse still, Alexander's reign was marred by political manipulation. He was young, unprepared, and often isolated from his parents. Sophia was denied contact with him, and her letters were censored or blocked. Her maternal instincts battled with political impotence as she observed from afar the erosion of her family's place in Greek society. The royal exile took them to Switzerland, where Sophia tried to recreate a sense of normalcy. But she remained haunted by her separation from Alexander, by Constantine's quiet despair, and by the unrelenting whispers of betrayal that followed her name. Through it all, Sophia endured with dignity. Her silence in the face of political intrigue was not weakness, it was her way of resisting collapse. Even in the shadows of power, she refused to let bitterness define her, holding firm to faith, memory, and the quiet hope of return. Switzerland became a quiet refuge for Sophia of Prussia and her exiled family. Far from the marble halls of Athens and the heated politics of war-torn Europe, the Swiss countryside offered peace, but not relief. Sophia, now stripped of her title, faced a life without courtly duties, without public reverence, and most painfully, without her son. In their modest home near Lucerne, Sophia devoted herself to family, faith, and charity. She managed the household with quiet efficiency and continued her work with the Red Cross and other humanitarian efforts. But the emotional cost of exile was heavy. Constantine struggled with his diminished role, while Sophia bore the growing grief of watching their children carry the weight of political exile and uncertain futures. Communication with her son Alexander, now King of Greece, remained limited and fraught. Her requests to visit were repeatedly denied. When Alexander died suddenly in 1920 from a blood infection caused by a monkey bite, Sophia was devastated. She had been kept away from him in life and was not allowed to mourn him in Greece. Despite these tragedies, Sophia remained composed. Her strength came from her orthodox faith, her deep sense of maternal duty, and the bonds she nurtured within her family. Even as the world turned cold to monarchies, she believed in the value of honor, memory, and resilience. Switzerland may have been neutral in war, but for Sophia, it became a battleground of grief and grace, where she struggled to hold her fractured world together with the dignity that had defined her since childhood. In 1920, following the sudden and strange death of King Alexander and a shift in public sentiment, a referendum was held in Greece. The result favored the restoration of King Constantine I. After 3 years in exile, Sophia and Constantine returned to Athens, not in triumph, but under the weight of loss and deepening national division. Sophia's return to the palace was bittersweet. The city she once knew felt changed. The warmth of public admiration had cooled into skepticism. Political tensions had not eased, they had deepened. The nation was now embroiled in the Greco-Turkish War, and the monarchy's return did little to stabilize the fragile political climate. Constantine's health was in decline, and he struggled to assert authority amid chaos. Sophia resumed her charitable work and tried to restore some sense of normalcy within the palace, but the political winds were against her. The military campaign in Asia Minor faltered, and the royal family was once again blamed. Public confidence eroded quickly, and the monarchy stood on the edge of collapse. By 1922, after a military coup and national disaster in Asia Minor, Constantine was forced to abdicate for a second and final time, this time in favor of their son, George II. Once again, Sophia found herself packing belongings and preparing for exile. The dream of restoration had proven hollow. Still, Sophia met the moment with dignity. Her loyalty to Constantine never wavered, and her quiet composure in crisis remained a mark of her character. Her second departure from Greece confirmed what exile had already taught her, that crowns could be returned, but trust, once broken, was far harder to restore. In the aftermath of Constantine's second abdication, Sophia and her husband left Greece once more, this time with no illusions of return. They settled in Italy, taking refuge in the quiet seaside town of Palermo. There, away from the grandeur of palaces and the burden of crowns, Sophia faced her most profound sorrow. In January of 1923, King Constantine I passed away at the age of 54. His health, already fragile, had declined rapidly after the failures of his second reign and the crushing weight of exile. Sophia, who had stood beside him through triumph and disgrace, was now a widow and no longer queen in any formal sense. The grief was immense but private. There were no state ceremonies, no processions of mourning citizens. Instead, Sophia mourned in silence, surrounded by a few loyal family members and courtiers. The world had moved on from kings and queens, and Sophia was left with memories and the burden of survival. After Constantine's death, Sophia relocated to Florence, joining her eldest daughter, Helen, Queen Mother of Romania. She lived in quiet seclusion, tending to personal projects and corresponding with remaining allies. Her public life had ended, but she remained deeply involved in family affairs, watching from afar as her children navigated turbulent political landscapes. Widowhood stripped Sophia of her remaining roles, but not her quiet dignity. In the stillness of exile, she held fast to her faith, her memories, and the quiet belief that she had served her adopted homeland with loyalty, even if history refused to remember it. In the early 1930s, as political unrest spread across Europe, Sophia of Prussia faced a horror no mother should endure. Her son-in-law, King Carol II of Romania, had become a controversial and divisive figure, and her daughter Helen's marriage had collapsed under the weight of scandal and infidelity. But even this personal pain was overshadowed by something far more devastating: the tragic fate of Sophia's own son, Prince Andrew of Greece, and her grandsons. Prince Andrew, Sophia's fourth child, had lived a troubled life in exile after the family's final departure from Greece. Though he was spared execution after the Asia Minor disaster, his life was marked by displacement and disappointment. But the worst tragedy came years later, when Sophia's grandson, Prince Nicholas of Greece, was executed by firing squad in Romania during a period of intense political upheaval. These events shattered the last remnants of Sophia's faith in dynastic safety. Her once proud lineage was unraveling, not only through exile but now through bloodshed. Though far removed from the courts where these decisions were made, Sophia felt every loss deeply. The monarchy she had once helped build was crumbling not through revolution alone, but through the betrayals and failures within royal families themselves. In her quiet Florence residence, letters delivered more sorrow than comfort. Each sealed envelope brought news of another exile, another resignation, another death. Sophia, already weighed down by years of loss, now faced a loneliness shaped not just by politics, but by the irreversible ending of generations. Through it all, she bore her grief with the same silence and grace that had marked her entire life. In the final chapter of her life, Sophia of Prussia lived in quiet seclusion in Florence. No longer a queen, no longer a public figure, she became simply a mother, a widow, and a woman of letters. Her days were filled with correspondence, letters to her children scattered across Europe, to the few friends who had remained loyal, and to exiled royals who shared her sorrow. Each message carried warmth, wisdom, and the lingering pain of all she had lost. Faith became her strongest anchor. Having fully embraced Greek orthodoxy decades earlier, Sophia now found peace in prayer, ritual, and scripture. Her spiritual devotion was not performative but deeply personal, a quiet retreat from the noise of history. She read daily from her icons, lit candles in private corners of her home, and found comfort in the simplicity of ritual. Though physically frail, her mind remained sharp. She followed news of world affairs, royal upheavals, and the growing threats that loomed across Europe. She knew that war was stirring again, and that the royal houses of Europe, once so intertwined, were now brittle relics of another time. Sophia rarely spoke of her days as Queen of Greece. She left behind no memoirs, no grand declarations. Her legacy was preserved in the memories of those who knew her, a woman of deep reserve, quiet strength, and unwavering dignity. In her final years, Sophia did not seek redemption or recognition. She asked only for peace, and in the stillness of Florence, among her letters and prayers, she came closest to finding it. On the 13th of January in the year 1932, Sophia of Prussia passed away in Florence at the age of 61. Her death came quietly, far from the palaces and courts where she had once walked with purpose. No bells tolled in Athens, no grand procession followed her coffin through marble streets. The former Queen of Greece, born a Prussian princess and sister to an emperor, slipped from the world in near silence. Sophia's body was laid to rest in the Russian Church of Florence for a time, as political conditions in Greece made a royal burial uncertain. Years later, after the monarchy had been cautiously restored, her remains were finally transferred to the royal cemetery at Tatoi Palace near Athens, a place she had once called home. The journey from exile to return, even in death, reflected the tragedy of her life's arc. Despite her tireless charity, her unwavering dignity, and her quiet faithfulness to Greece, Sophia's name faded from history books. Overshadowed by wars, revolutions, and the dramatic personalities around her, she became a footnote in royal genealogies, remembered more for her family ties than her personal strength. Yet for those who knew her, Sophia's legacy endured. She was a queen who served without spectacle, who loved without condition, and who bore sorrow without complaint. Her silence was not weakness, it was her strength. And though history may forget her voice, the echo of her grace still lingers where it once mattered most. In the heart of a fractured nation she had tried so hard to call her own. Sophia of Prussia lived a life shaped by empire, duty, and quiet perseverance. Born into the heart of the German imperial dynasty, she was raised among the traditions of Prussian discipline and Lutheran faith. Yet her destiny carried her far beyond Berlin. As Queen of Greece, she embraced a new culture, a new religion, and a new identity, trading the iron grandeur of her birth for the fragile idealism of a young nation in turmoil. Her legacy cannot be measured by grand reforms or sweeping political gestures. Instead, it lives in quieter acts: the hospitals she supported, the wounded soldiers she comforted, the children she raised with dignity through war and exile. She was not a ruler in the conventional sense. She did not command armies or shape constitutions, but she offered steadiness in a world that often spun out of control. Caught between the collapsing empires of Europe and the volatile rise of nationalism, Sophia remained loyal to ideals of service, faith, and family. Her German roots were a lifelong burden in Greek politics, yet she never renounced them. Her love for Greece was sincere and sacrificial, even when it gave her only suspicion and sorrow in return. In the end, Sophia's story is one of resilience. A woman of royal blood who endured betrayal, displacement, and silence, and bore them all with remarkable composure. She belonged to no single country, and yet her legacy now stretches across many. A queen without applause, but never without meaning. What do you think about Alexandra Feodorovna of Russia? Was she a devoted empress, a woman of deep faith and quiet strength, who endured tragedy with grace and gave her heart to a land not her own? Or was she a misunderstood figure, caught between cultures, emotionally isolated, and remembered more for her melancholy than her majesty? And what about Sophia of Prussia? Was Sophia a steady queen who embraced a foreign crown with dignity, a symbol of loyalty, service, and silent resilience through war and exile? Or was she merely a drifting figure, exiled from one homeland, rejected by another, her legacy eclipsed by louder voices in history? Were these women pillars of royal endurance, or shadows cast by the weight of empire? Did they shape history through silent strength, or were their sacrifices swallowed by the silence that followed them? In their pain, did we overlook their power? We invite you to share your thoughts below, and if their stories touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more journeys into the hidden hearts of history. Thank you so much for watching.